Welcome to Crisis in Perception, where we examine the systems shaping our world, one book at a time. So today, we're diving into Douglas Murray's NeoConservatism, Why We Need It. Now, this was written way back in 2005, but its central question feels more relevant than ever. What happens to a society when the very things it believes in, its core values, start to feel, well, unstable? Murray kicks things off with a pretty powerful diagnosis. He doesn't just say society is changing, he says it's adrift. Think about that, like a ship without a rudder, just floating, with no real direction. This feeling of being lost, of being adrift, is the core problem he wants to tackle. To really get a handle on this crisis of direction, we're going to use one central metaphor that the book hints at: a society's moral compass. Okay, so here's the absolute heart of the argument. When our major institutions, we're talking government, education, the media, try so hard to be neutral and avoid making any clear judgments about what's right or wrong, they create a kind of vacuum. And into that vacuum steps something called moral relativism, which just becomes the new default setting for everything. So what exactly is moral relativism? You know, at its core, it's the idea that there's no such thing as a universal good or evil. Right and wrong are seen as subjective. They just depend on your personal feelings or your culture. There's no absolute true north on the moral map. And this is where that compass metaphor really clicks, right? If there's no true north, no shared fixed principles, then what does a compass do? It just spins and spins. How can a whole society move in the same direction if everyone's compass is pointing somewhere different? According to Murray, this is the very source of that societal drift. And this isn't a one-off problem. It actually creates a systemic feedback loop. First, institutions are rewarded for being neutral and not taking a stand. But over time, that neutrality starts to erode the shared values that hold society together. And then that fragmentation, that feeling of being lost, creates this deep, powerful hunger for, well, for answers, for some kind of moral clarity to make the spinning stop. And this is what leads us to the book's proposed solution. It puts forward neoconservatism not just as a political party, but as a whole system of thought designed to grab that spinning compass and forcefully recalibrate it. So how would you even do that? Well, Murray points to thinkers like Irving Kristol, who basically laid out a toolkit for moral clarity. The principles in this toolkit are designed to be super unambiguous, to create that fixed true north. Things like patriotism isn't just okay, it's a positive force. A single world government is a real threat to freedom. And, crucially, leaders have to be able to draw a clear line between friends and enemies. This slide really puts the two systems side by side, and wow, you can see the contrast. On one side, you have relativism, where the compass is spinning and, hey, all directions are pretty much equal. But on the other, you have the neoconservative approach, which says, nope, we are resetting this compass right now. It's all about trading moral ambiguity for moral assertion. It insists that making these judgments isn't just a choice, it's absolutely essential for survival. And this quote just brilliantly sums up the stakes from the book's point of view. If a society starts to think that being morally clear is itself a suspicious thing, it becomes vulnerable. The argument is that this cultural drift isn't some academic debate. It has real-world effects on safety and stability. The ship needs to be moored, tied to a secure anchor. So it kind of begs the question, right? Why do strong ideological systems like this one become so appealing? Well, from a systems perspective, their main function is to reduce uncertainty. In a world that feels increasingly chaotic and complex, a system that offers clear answers and a defined path forward can feel like a lifeline. It simplifies the map. Okay, let's zoom out now and look at the whole system, because Murray argues that this moral crisis isn't just happening in a bubble. It's interconnected across every single part of our society. And this is a really critical insight from systems thinking. You can't just look at politics over here and the media over there and education in its own little silo. They're all what we call nested systems. They all fit together and deeply influence one another. If you only focus on one piece, you completely miss the larger structure of the problem. So let's take the first nested system, education. The book argues that when you have what it calls a paucity of morality in schools, basically a lack of clear moral instruction, you're essentially handing the next generation a spinning compass from the get-go. Next up, the media. From the book's perspective, the media saw that moral vacuum we talked about and just jumped right in. It sort of appointed itself the new judge of what's right and wrong, but without the historical foundations or the accountability that traditional moral institutions used to have. And finally, all of this internal confusion leads to external consequences. In the world of politics and foreign policy, a nation that isn't really sure what it stands for is going to struggle to act with any real conviction. This, the book claims, is what leads to inaction and confusion when faced with very real global threats. So when you tie all this together, you see the real problem: the failure to see how all these pieces connect. This inability to perceive the entire system, to see that the drift in our schools, in our media, and in our foreign policy are all just symptoms of the very same core issue. That is the crisis in perception. And that leaves us with this final, really provocative question that cuts right to the heart of the whole debate. If the foundations of a society start to feel like they're cracking, is the only solution to rebuild them with the hard certainty of moral absolutes, or are there other ways to find our footing? This project is free and publicly accessible. If you'd like to support the time, tools, and research behind Crisis in Perception, you can become a supporter on Patreon. For a longer audio-based analysis of this topic, see the deep dive linked in the description. If you enjoy this kind of systems-level analysis, please like, subscribe, and comment with books or topics you'd like us to explore next.